Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that certain steps in Andritz's manufacturing process for industrial pumps are perceived as time-consuming and potentially inefficient, leading to suggestions for streamlining these steps to reduce production lead times. Considering the company's commitment to quality and adherence to relevant industry standards, which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to this feedback? Option A. Prioritize the implementation of the suggested changes that offer the most significant cost savings, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently maintain or improve quality. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the suggested process modifications by a dedicated team comprising process engineers, quality assurance specialists, and regulatory compliance officers to assess their feasibility, impact on product quality, and adherence to all applicable regulations before any implementation. Option C. Formally acknowledge the feedback, but dismiss the suggestions as outside the scope of current operational priorities without further investigation. Option D. Immediately implement the suggested process streamlining measures to demonstrate responsiveness to stakeholder feedback and achieve faster production cycles. Correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the suggested process modifications by a dedicated team comprising process engineers, quality assurance specialists, and regulatory compliance officers to assess their feasibility, impact on product quality, and adherence to all applicable regulations before any implementation. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain product quality and safety, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing the manufacturing sector. Stakeholder feedback, while valuable, can be subjective and may not always align with established operational standards or legal requirements. Therefore, a careful and evidence-based approach is necessary to avoid compromising compliance or customer trust. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the proposed process optimization by a cross-functional team, including quality assurance and regulatory compliance personnel. This ensures that any changes are evaluated against current industry standards, company policies, and relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to product integrity and manufacturing processes. This methodical evaluation, which prioritizes compliance and quality, aligns with the ethical obligation to produce safe and reliable products and the regulatory requirement to adhere to established manufacturing protocols. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the suggested changes based solely on the feedback, without thorough validation. This bypasses critical quality control and regulatory review, potentially leading to non-compliance with manufacturing standards and product safety regulations. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the feedback outright without investigation. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to stakeholder concerns and could lead to missed opportunities for genuine improvement, potentially impacting customer satisfaction and market reputation, which can have indirect regulatory implications if it leads to widespread product issues. A third incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on cost savings, without considering the impact on process integrity or regulatory adherence. This prioritizes financial metrics over compliance and safety, which is a direct contravention of regulatory expectations for responsible manufacturing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the source and nature of stakeholder feedback. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the feedback's implications, considering all relevant operational, quality, and regulatory factors. The process should involve collaboration with relevant departments, data-driven analysis, and a clear justification for any decisions made, ensuring alignment with both business objectives and legal/ethical obligations. Question 2. Upon reviewing potential process optimizations for Andritz's manufacturing operations, which approach best aligns with the absolute priority of adhering strictly to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the Andritz hiring assessment test? Option A. Implement process changes that offer the most immediate efficiency gains, with a plan to address any potential regulatory issues that may arise after the changes are in effect. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines specific to the exam's defined jurisdiction, and ensure all proposed process optimizations are fully compliant before implementation. Option C. Prioritize implementing changes that demonstrably reduce operational costs and increase throughput, assuming that standard industry practices are generally compliant across most jurisdictions. Option D. Focus on adopting innovative process technologies that have proven successful in other companies, without extensive verification of their compliance with the specific regulatory environment mandated for this assessment. The correct answer is C. Prioritize implementing changes that demonstrably reduce operational costs and increase throughput, assuming that standard industry practices are generally compliant across most jurisdictions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency with the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks and ethical standards. The pressure to optimize processes, especially within a company like Andritz that operates in a highly regulated industrial sector, can create a tension between speed and compliance. Misinterpreting or disregarding regulatory requirements in the name of efficiency can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently violate any applicable laws or ethical guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review and understanding of all relevant regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines applicable to Andritz's operations before implementing any process optimization. This ensures that any proposed changes are compliant from the outset. Specifically, this means consulting the Andritz hiring assessment test stipulated regulatory environment, which, for the purpose of this exam, is assumed to be a specific, defined jurisdiction, e.g., UK regulations and CISI guidelines or US regulations, etc. The exam's jurisdiction dictates the specific rules. Adherence to these defined rules is paramount. For instance, if the exam specifies UK regulations, this would involve understanding the health and safety at work, etc. Act 1974, relevant environmental regulations, and any industry-specific codes of practice. If US regulations are specified, it would involve understanding OSHA standards, EPA regulations, etc. The ethical justification lies in the duty of care to employees, the public, and the environment, as well as the fiduciary responsibility to the company and its stakeholders to operate legally and responsibly. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing process changes based solely on perceived efficiency gains without a comprehensive regulatory review is an incorrect approach. This fails to uphold the primary requirement of operating within the law. For example, a process that speeds up production but increases emissions beyond permitted levels would violate environmental regulations. Similarly, a change that reduces safety protocols to save time would contravene health and safety legislation. Relying on anecdotal evidence or industry best practices from other jurisdictions is also incorrect, as it directly violates the strict jurisdiction compliance requirement of the exam. Each jurisdiction has unique laws and guidelines, and assuming universality is a critical ethical and regulatory failure. Furthermore, prioritizing cost reduction over compliance, even if the cost savings are substantial, is a direct contravention of legal and ethical obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with process optimization must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should begin with a comprehensive identification and understanding of all applicable regulatory requirements for the specific jurisdiction. This involves consulting legal counsel, compliance officers, and relevant regulatory bodies. Any proposed optimization should then be assessed against these requirements. If a proposed change appears to conflict with regulations, it must be modified or abandoned. Continuous monitoring and auditing of implemented processes are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance. The ultimate goal is to achieve efficiency gains within the bounds of the law and ethical conduct, not at their expense. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed process optimization at Andritz could significantly reduce operational expenses. However, before implementing these changes, what is the most critical step to ensure compliance and responsible execution? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review and potential revision of existing standard operating procedures, SOP, to align with current best practices and regulatory requirements. Option B. Focus exclusively on the technical aspects of the optimization to ensure it functions as intended from an engineering perspective. Option C. Implement the optimization immediately to capture the projected cost savings as quickly as possible. Option D. Proceed with the optimization based solely on the projected financial benefits, assuming current procedures are adequate. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review and potential revision of existing standard operating procedures, SOP, to align with current best practices and regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Andritz to balance the potential financial benefits of a process optimization initiative against the imperative to maintain compliance with relevant regulatory frameworks and ethical standards. The pressure to achieve cost savings can sometimes lead to shortcuts or overlooking critical procedural steps, which could have significant legal, financial, and reputational consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not compromise safety, environmental protection, or data integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review and potential revision of existing standard operating procedures, SOP, to align with current best practices and regulatory requirements before implementing any optimization. This ensures that the proposed changes are not only cost-effective, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Specifically, this approach prioritizes adherence to the Andritz internal compliance policies and any applicable industry-specific regulations that govern process changes, ensuring that all stakeholders are informed and that potential risks are mitigated through a structured review process. This proactive stance prevents future noncompliance issues and reinforces a culture of responsible operational management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the optimization without a formal review of SOPs risks introducing changes that may inadvertently violate existing regulations or internal policies. This could lead to operational inefficiencies, safety hazards, or data inaccuracies, all of which carry potential legal ramifications and financial penalties. Adopting the optimization based solely on projected cost savings, without considering the impact on quality control or regulatory adherence, demonstrates a failure to uphold professional responsibility. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and compliance, which is ethically questionable and could expose Andritz to significant risks. Focusing on the optimization's technical feasibility alone, while neglecting the procedural and regulatory implications, overlooks a crucial aspect of process management. Technical success does not guarantee compliance or ethical operation. This narrow focus can lead to unintended consequences that undermine the overall success and integrity of the initiative. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Andritz should employ a decision-making framework that integrates operational efficiency with robust compliance and ethical considerations. This involves a multi-stage process. First, clearly defining the objectives of the process optimization, including both financial targets and compliance requirements. Second, conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential regulatory, safety, and ethical challenges associated with proposed changes. Third, engaging relevant stakeholders, including compliance officers, legal counsel, and operational teams, in the review and approval process. Fourth, documenting all changes and ensuring that updated SOPs are communicated and implemented effectively. Finally, establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and auditing to ensure sustained compliance and identify any emergent issues. Question 4. The control framework reveals potential inefficiencies in the procurement process at Andritz. A new initiative aims to streamline these operations and reduce associated costs. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with the maintenance of robust internal controls and compliance? Option A. Immediately implement a new, simplified procurement system based on a competitor's publicly available process, focusing solely on reducing the number of approval steps to accelerate transaction times. Option B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of identified inefficiencies, map current and proposed process flows, assess the impact of proposed changes on existing controls, and validate the revised process through pilot testing and stakeholder feedback before full implementation. Option C. Delegate the entire process redesign to a third-party consultant, without requiring them to adhere to Andritz's internal control documentation or specific compliance mandates. Option D. Prioritize the reduction of manual data entry by automating a significant portion of the procurement workflow, without conducting a thorough risk assessment of the new automated steps or verifying data integrity controls. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of identified inefficiencies, Map current and proposed process flows. Assess the impact of proposed changes on existing controls, and validate the revised process through pilot testing and stakeholder feedback before full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain robust internal controls and compliance with Andritz's established operational standards and any applicable regulatory requirements. A hasty or poorly considered approach to process optimization could inadvertently create new risks, undermine existing safeguards, or lead to noncompliance, potentially impacting the company's reputation and financial performance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed changes are not only efficient, but also effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough, data-driven analysis of existing processes, identifying specific bottlenecks or inefficiencies, and then proposing targeted improvements that are validated against Andritz's internal control framework and relevant industry best practices. This approach prioritizes understanding the why behind current processes and ensuring that any modifications do not compromise the integrity of controls or introduce new compliance risks. It aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and operational excellence, ensuring that process optimization serves the broader strategic objectives of Andritz without creating undue risk. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a comprehensive risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential downstream consequences of such changes, such as increased error rates, weakened segregation of duties, or noncompliance with reporting standards, which could lead to significant financial penalties or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper stakeholder consultation would also be professionally unsound. This overlooks the importance of diverse perspectives and the potential for unintended consequences that can arise when changes are not thoroughly vetted by those who operate within or are affected by the processes. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to principles of change management that emphasize collaboration and validation. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough testing and validation would be a critical ethical and professional failing. This haste could lead to the deployment of flawed processes that are difficult to rectify, potentially causing ongoing operational disruptions and compliance breaches. It signifies a prioritization of short-term gains over long-term stability and integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives, followed by a comprehensive assessment of the current state, including risks and controls. Proposed solutions should then be rigorously evaluated for their impact on efficiency, effectiveness, and compliance. Pilot testing, stakeholder engagement, and a phased implementation with continuous monitoring are crucial steps to ensure successful and compliant process optimization. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that a particular process at Andritz is experiencing inefficiencies. To optimize this process, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of adhering strictly to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the Andritz hiring assessment test? Option A. Proposing process improvements based on a comprehensive review of the Andritz hiring assessment test stipulated regulatory framework, ensuring all proposed changes are compliant and ethically sound within the assessment's context. Option B. Utilizing external industry best practices for process optimization that are not explicitly mentioned or referenced within the Andritz hiring assessment test's provided documentation. Option C. Suggesting a rapid implementation of a widely recognized optimization strategy to achieve immediate efficiency gains, even if it means bypassing some of the detailed procedural requirements outlined in the assessment's guidelines. Option D. Implementing a novel optimization technique that has demonstrated significant cost savings in other industries without first verifying its compatibility with the assessment's specific jurisdictional requirements. The correct answer is D. Implementing a novel optimization technique that has demonstrated significant cost savings in other industries without first verifying its compatibility with the assessment's specific jurisdictional requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Andritz employee tasked with optimizing a process. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of efficiency gains with the imperative to adhere strictly to the Andritz hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. Misinterpreting or deviating from these established standards can lead to non-compliance, potentially impacting the company's reputation and operational integrity. Careful judgment is required to identify the most appropriate optimization strategy that aligns with the assessment's specific jurisdictional requirements. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the Andritz hiring assessment test's stipulated regulatory framework. This means prioritizing methods that are explicitly permitted or encouraged within the assessment's guidelines for process optimization. The justification for this approach is rooted in the assessment's purpose: to evaluate a candidate's ability to operate within a defined set of rules and standards. Adhering to these guidelines demonstrates a candidate's commitment to compliance, a critical attribute for any employee. An incorrect approach would be to implement optimization strategies that, while potentially effective in a general business context, are not aligned with the specific regulatory framework of the Andritz hiring assessment test. For instance, adopting a method that relies on data sources or analytical techniques not sanctioned by the assessment's guidelines would be a regulatory failure. Ethically, this demonstrates a disregard for the established assessment parameters and a lack of due diligence in understanding the specific requirements of the evaluation. Another incorrect approach might be to prioritize speed of implementation over adherence to the assessment's procedural requirements, which would be an ethical failure as it undermines the integrity of the assessment process. Professionals should approach such situations by first meticulously reviewing and understanding the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines provided for the assessment. They should then evaluate potential optimization approaches against these established parameters, ensuring that any proposed changes are compliant and ethically sound within the defined context. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to the assessment's jurisdiction above all else, demonstrating a commitment to professional integrity and compliance. Question 6. Assessment of a proposed process optimization initiative at Andritz. An employee suggests implementing a new workflow that significantly reduces manual data entry. This suggestion is based on a recent industry trend observed in a competitor's operations. What is the most appropriate initial step for the Andritz employee to take in evaluating this suggestion, strictly adhering to the principles of the Andritz hiring assessment test? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of current Andritz operational procedures and relevant internal guidelines to understand how the proposed workflow aligns with existing protocols and identify any potential compliance gaps. Option B. Rely on the observed competitor's success as sufficient validation and proceed with a pilot implementation without further internal review. Option C. Focus solely on the potential cost savings associated with reduced manual data entry, prioritizing financial benefits over procedural adherence. Option D. Immediately implement the new workflow to gain a competitive advantage, assuming that industry trends are inherently beneficial and compliant. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of current Andritz operational procedures and relevant internal guidelines to understand how the proposed workflow aligns with existing protocols and identify any potential compliance gaps. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Andritz employee tasked with optimizing a process. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of efficiency gains with the imperative to adhere strictly to the Andritz hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines. This requires a nuanced understanding of how process improvements can intersect with compliance, ethical considerations, and the specific operational context within Andritz. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that any proposed optimization does not inadvertently violate established protocols or create new risks. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing Andritz operational procedures and relevant industry best practices, followed by a data-driven assessment of potential improvements. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes a systematic and compliant method for process optimization. It ensures that any proposed changes are evaluated against established standards and potential impacts are understood before implementation. This aligns with the spirit of a hiring assessment, which seeks candidates who can demonstrate responsible and informed decision-making within a defined framework. The focus on data and existing procedures reflects a commitment to evidence-based improvements that are less likely to introduce unforeseen compliance issues. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without adequate review risks overlooking critical compliance requirements or unintended consequences. This could lead to operational disruptions, regulatory breaches, or a failure to meet the specific standards expected within the Andritz operational environment. Another incorrect approach, which relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition, lacks the rigor necessary for professional process optimization. Such methods are prone to bias and may not identify the most effective or compliant solutions, potentially leading to wasted resources or the implementation of suboptimal processes. A third incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost reduction above all else without considering process integrity or compliance, is ethically and professionally unsound. This can lead to shortcuts that compromise quality, safety, or regulatory adherence, ultimately undermining the long-term success and reputation of Andritz. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific objectives and constraints of the task. This involves clearly defining what optimization means in the context of Andritz's operations and its regulatory environment. Next, they should gather relevant information, including existing procedures, performance data, and any applicable guidelines. This information should then be analyzed to identify potential areas for improvement. Proposed solutions should be evaluated not only for their efficiency benefits, but also for their compliance with all relevant regulations and ethical standards. Finally, a well-reasoned recommendation should be formulated, supported by evidence, and a clear understanding of the potential risks and benefits. Question 7. Which approach would be most appropriate for Andritz to adopt when seeking to optimize its internal operational workflows, ensuring both efficiency gains and strict adherence to relevant industry regulations and ethical standards? Option A. Prioritizing rapid implementation of cost-saving measures, with a secondary consideration for regulatory compliance only if issues arise post-implementation. Option B. Conducting a thorough review of current processes, identifying areas for improvement, and developing solutions that are explicitly designed to meet all applicable regulatory requirements and ethical guidelines before implementation. Option C. Relying on the experience of long-serving employees to suggest process improvements, without formal documentation or external validation of their impact on compliance. Option D. Implementing changes based on the latest industry trends and competitor best practices, assuming they align with general business principles. The correct answer is D. Implementing changes based on the latest industry trends and competitor best practices, assuming they align with general business principles. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Andritz, as a global engineering and industrial company, operates within diverse regulatory environments and ethical expectations. When optimizing processes, especially those impacting safety, environmental compliance, or data integrity, a rigorous and compliant approach is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing efficiency gains with adherence to established frameworks, ensuring that improvements do not inadvertently create new risks or violate existing regulations. Careful judgment is required to select an optimization strategy that is not only effective but also legally sound and ethically responsible. The correct approach involves a systematic review and enhancement of existing processes, prioritizing compliance and risk mitigation. This entails understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to Andritz's operations in the relevant jurisdiction, identifying potential areas for improvement, and implementing changes through a controlled and documented process. This method is justified by the fundamental ethical and legal obligation to operate within the bounds of the law and to uphold industry best practices. It ensures that any process optimization undertaken by Andritz is sustainable, minimizes potential harm, and maintains the company's reputation and integrity. An approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations, potentially leading to fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment and validation overlooks the critical need for due diligence. This can result in the introduction of new vulnerabilities or non-compliance issues that may be more costly to rectify later. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or unverified assumptions, without grounding improvements in data and established methodologies, also fails to meet professional standards. This can lead to ineffective optimizations that do not achieve desired outcomes and may even introduce unintended negative consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives, followed by a comprehensive assessment of the current process, including all relevant regulatory requirements and potential risks. The next step involves identifying and evaluating potential optimization strategies, with a strong emphasis on their compliance and risk profiles. The chosen strategy should then be implemented through a controlled process, with ongoing monitoring and evaluation to ensure continued compliance and effectiveness. Question 8. Implementation of a new data aggregation method within Andritz's manufacturing process to improve reporting efficiency requires careful consideration of existing regulatory frameworks. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and ethical data handling while achieving the desired efficiency gains? Option A. Implement the new aggregation method solely based on its perceived cost-saving potential, without a formal assessment of its impact on data accuracy or regulatory adherence. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed data aggregation method against all relevant Andritz internal policies and applicable external regulations before deployment, ensuring data integrity and privacy are maintained throughout the process. Option C. Immediately deploy the new aggregation method, assuming it streamlines data flow and will be retrospectively reviewed for compliance. Option D. Prioritize the speed of deployment for the new aggregation method to achieve immediate efficiency benefits, with compliance checks deferred to a later, less critical stage. Correct answer is C. Immediately deploy the new aggregation method, assuming it streamlines data flow and will be retrospectively reviewed for compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Andritz employee tasked with optimizing a process. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines, particularly concerning data handling and reporting. A hasty or incomplete approach to process optimization can lead to significant compliance risks and reputational damage for Andritz. The correct approach involves a systematic and compliant methodology. This begins with a thorough understanding of the existing process, identifying bottlenecks, and then proposing changes that are not only efficient, but also demonstrably within regulatory boundaries. Crucially, any proposed changes must be validated against relevant Andritz internal policies and any applicable external regulations that govern the specific processes being optimized. This includes ensuring that data integrity is maintained, privacy is respected, and that all reporting remains accurate and transparent. This methodical, compliance-first strategy mitigates risks and ensures that optimization efforts contribute positively to Andritz's operational and ethical standing. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by immediately implementing changes without adequate review risks several regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, bypassing the validation step could lead to the introduction of new inefficiencies, or, more critically, the inadvertent violation of data protection regulations if personal or sensitive company data is mishandled during the optimization. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on process integrity or regulatory compliance, could result in shortcuts that compromise product quality or safety, leading to potential breaches of industry standards and legal liabilities. Furthermore, failing to document the optimization process and its outcomes thoroughly can hinder future audits and investigations, creating an environment of opacity that is antithetical to good corporate governance and regulatory expectations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape and internal policies before proposing or implementing any process changes. This involves a risk assessment phase where potential compliance issues are identified and addressed proactively. Collaboration with legal, compliance, and relevant operational departments is essential to ensure that all proposed optimizations are robust, ethical, and legally sound. The process should be iterative, with continuous monitoring and evaluation to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a high probability of candidate dissatisfaction due to extended waiting times for assessment results at Andritz. Which of the following approaches best balances operational efficiency with regulatory compliance and ethical hiring practices? Option A. Prioritize a review of the assessment's validity and fairness against the relevant regulatory framework, and then optimize the review process to ensure timely and compliant feedback. Option B. Implement a standardized automated feedback system that provides immediate results to all candidates, regardless of the assessment's complexity or the need for nuanced interpretation. Option C. Focus solely on reducing the time taken for each assessment stage, as indicated by the risk matrix, to improve overall efficiency. Option D. Expedite the assessment review process by reducing the number of validation checks to meet the target turnaround time. Correct answer is D. Expedite the assessment review process by reducing the number of validation checks to meet the target turnaround time. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Andritz's hiring managers to balance the need for efficient recruitment with the imperative to adhere to the specific regulatory framework governing hiring assessments in their jurisdiction. The risk matrix, a common tool in process optimization, highlights potential areas of concern, but its interpretation must be grounded in legal and ethical compliance, not just operational efficiency. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks that could lead to discriminatory hiring practices or noncompliance with assessment regulations, which could result in legal repercussions and reputational damage for Andritz. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the assessment design and implementation against the established regulatory framework. This means ensuring that the assessment tools are validated, relevant to the job requirements, and administered in a way that does not disadvantage protected groups. Specifically, it requires understanding and applying principles of fair assessment, data privacy, and non-discrimination as mandated by the relevant laws and guidelines. This approach prioritizes compliance and fairness, which are paramount in any hiring process. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the efficiency metrics presented in the risk matrix without considering the regulatory implications. For instance, if the risk matrix indicates a high risk of delays in candidate feedback due to a manual review process, an incorrect approach might be to automate feedback without ensuring the automated system is free from bias or that it complies with data protection regulations regarding candidate information. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss potential risks related to assessment validity or fairness simply because they are not quantifiable in the risk matrix's efficiency metrics. This would be a failure to uphold ethical standards and regulatory obligations, potentially leading to legal challenges and undermining the integrity of the hiring process. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that integrates risk assessment with regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to hiring assessments in their jurisdiction. 2. Using tools like the risk matrix to identify potential operational issues. 3. Critically evaluating identified risks through a regulatory and ethical lens, determining if they pose a compliance or fairness concern. 4. Prioritizing actions that mitigate both operational inefficiencies and regulatory/ethical risks, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of compliance or fairness. Question 10. During the evaluation of the Andritz hiring assessment test platform for potential process optimization, a team proposes streamlining data input by directly integrating a new third-party tool that automatically extracts information from candidate resumes. This tool has not undergone a formal security audit or validation for its compatibility with the existing assessment data structure, which approach best aligns with professional best practices and the likely regulatory framework governing such assessments. Option A. Implement the third-party tool immediately to expedite data processing and reduce manual entry, as efficiency is a primary goal of process optimization. Option B. Delay the optimization process indefinitely until a perfectly secure and universally compatible data extraction tool can be identified, prioritizing absolute risk avoidance over any potential efficiency gains. Option C. Proceed with integrating the tool, but instruct the assessment administrators to manually cross-reference all extracted data with original resumes to mitigate potential errors. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the third-party tool, including its data security protocols, compatibility with the assessment's data integrity requirements, and compliance with relevant data protection regulations before considering integration. The correct answer is A. Implement the third-party tool immediately to expedite data processing and reduce manual entry, as efficiency is a primary goal of process optimization. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the ethical imperative to maintain data integrity and client confidentiality, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Andritz hiring assessment test jurisdiction. A hasty or incomplete optimization process could lead to breaches of data privacy, inaccurate assessments, and ultimately, a flawed hiring decision, undermining the credibility of the assessment process. The correct approach involves a systematic and validated methodology for process optimization that prioritizes data security and accuracy. This means any changes to the assessment platform or its underlying data handling must be rigorously tested, documented, and approved according to established internal policies and any relevant external guidelines that govern data handling and assessment integrity within the specified jurisdiction. This ensures that the optimization does not inadvertently compromise the validity or fairness of the hiring assessment, adhering to principles of professional conduct and any applicable data protection regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering the impact on data integrity or security would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, implementing changes without proper testing could introduce errors into candidate data, leading to incorrect evaluations. Furthermore, bypassing established data handling protocols could violate confidentiality agreements or data privacy laws, exposing Andritz and its candidates to significant risks. Another incorrect approach might involve adopting a new optimization technique without understanding its implications for the specific types of data collected during the assessment, potentially leading to misinterpretation or loss of critical information. These failures stem from a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the professional and regulatory obligations associated with conducting hiring assessments. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the assessment's objectives and the regulatory environment. This involves identifying potential risks associated with any proposed optimization, evaluating the impact on data quality and security, and ensuring that all changes are compliant with internal policies and external regulations. A phased implementation with robust testing and validation, coupled with clear communication and documentation, is crucial for making informed and ethically sound decisions in process optimization. Question 11. Compliance review shows that Andritz is exploring opportunities to streamline its project reporting procedures to enhance efficiency. One proposed optimization involves consolidating data from multiple project management systems into a single platform for faster analysis. However, the data includes sensitive client information and proprietary project details. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory and ethical best practices for process optimization at Andritz? Option A. Implement the data consolidation using existing security measures, assuming they are sufficient, and then engage legal counsel to review the process for compliance after the system is operational. Option B. Focus on the technical aspects of data integration, assuming that standard IT security protocols will automatically ensure regulatory compliance for all data types involved. Option C. Prioritize the consolidation of all data into a single platform immediately to achieve rapid efficiency gains, with a plan to address data security and privacy concerns in a subsequent phase. Option D. Conduct a thorough assessment of all applicable data protection regulations and internal data governance policies before initiating any data consolidation, ensuring the new platform design incorporates robust security and privacy controls from inception. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the consolidation of all data into a single platform immediately to achieve rapid efficiency gains, with a plan to address data security and privacy concerns in a subsequent phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational efficiency goals with the imperative to adhere to regulatory frameworks governing data handling and reporting. The pressure to optimize processes, a common objective in hiring assessments, must be tempered by a thorough understanding of compliance obligations. Misinterpreting or overlooking these obligations can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage for Andritz. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and integrating regulatory requirements into the process optimization strategy from the outset. This means not treating compliance as an afterthought or a separate hurdle, but as a fundamental component of efficient and sustainable process design. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes adherence to established laws and guidelines, ensuring that Andritz operates within legal boundaries and maintains stakeholder trust. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible business practices, which is often a key consideration in hiring assessments. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and cost reduction without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal framework, potentially leading to breaches of data privacy laws, reporting inaccuracies, or non-compliance with industry-specific regulations. Such an approach risks penalties, sanctions, and reputational harm, undermining the long-term viability of the optimized processes and the company itself. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes and then seeking retrospective regulatory approval or clarification is also flawed. This reactive stance creates uncertainty and exposes Andritz to potential non-compliance during the interim period. It suggests a lack of due diligence and foresight, which are critical professional attributes. Regulatory bodies expect proactive compliance, not a fix-it-later mentality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance. Before embarking on any process optimization, a comprehensive review of applicable laws, regulations, and internal policies must be conducted. This review should inform the design of the optimized process, ensuring that all compliance requirements are embedded. Furthermore, ongoing monitoring and periodic audits are essential to confirm sustained adherence to these standards. Collaboration with legal and compliance departments is crucial to navigate complex regulatory landscapes effectively. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that a proposed optimization for Andritz's manufacturing line in a specific European country could significantly reduce production cycle times. However, the proposed changes involve the introduction of a new chemical solvent. What is the most critical step Andritz must undertake before implementing this optimization? Option A. Focus solely on the cost savings and productivity improvements, deferring any regulatory checks until after the process has been running for a period. Option B. Proceed with the optimization immediately to capitalize on the potential efficiency gains, assuming that standard industrial practices are generally acceptable. Option C. Obtain informal verbal assurances from local suppliers that the new solvent is commonly used and considered safe. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable European Union directives and national environmental protection laws in that country to ensure the new solvent and its disposal methods comply with all regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable European Union directives and national environmental protection laws in that country to ensure the new solvent and its disposal methods comply with all regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Andritz, as a global engineering and industrial company, operates within diverse regulatory environments. When implementing process optimization, it is crucial to ensure that any proposed changes not only enhance efficiency and productivity, but also strictly adhere to the specific legal and regulatory frameworks applicable to the relevant operating regions. A failure to do so can lead to significant legal repercussions, financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative of compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review and understanding of all applicable regulations, including those related to environmental protection, worker safety, product quality standards, and data privacy, before any process changes are finalized or implemented. This ensures that optimization efforts are sustainable and legally sound. Specifically, for a company like Andritz, this would necessitate consulting relevant national laws, industry-specific regulations, and potentially international standards that have been adopted or are referenced in the jurisdictions where the processes are being optimized. This proactive compliance strategy mitigates risks and builds a foundation of trust with stakeholders and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize efficiency gains without a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment. For instance, implementing a new manufacturing process that reduces waste but inadvertently violates local environmental discharge limits would be a regulatory failure. Similarly, optimizing data collection for performance monitoring without considering data privacy laws like GDPR, if applicable to the region, would be an ethical and legal misstep. Another failure would be to assume that a process that is compliant in one region will automatically be compliant in another, ignoring the nuances of differing legal frameworks. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal obligations of operating in specific jurisdictions. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory jurisdictions. This is followed by a detailed assessment of the regulatory requirements within each jurisdiction that could be impacted by the proposed process optimization. A risk assessment should then be conducted to identify potential compliance gaps. Finally, any proposed process changes must be vetted against these identified requirements and risks, ensuring that all optimizations are implemented in a manner that is fully compliant and ethically sound. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that Andritz's manufacturing processes in its European and Asian subsidiaries could benefit from significant efficiency improvements. When considering the implementation of a new automated quality control system that might alter production line workflows and data collection methods, what is the most appropriate first step to ensure compliance and ethical operation across all affected regions? Option A. Proceed with the implementation of the new system based on the successful deployment in a pilot region, assuming similar regulatory environments. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable local laws, regulations, and industry-specific guidelines in each European and Asian subsidiary where the system will be deployed, and consult with local legal and compliance teams. Option C. Rely on the general principles of process optimization and assume that standard international business practices will cover any regulatory requirements. Option D. Prioritize the speed of implementation to gain a competitive advantage, addressing any potential regulatory issues only if they arise during or after deployment. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the implementation of the new system based on the successful deployment in a pilot region, assuming similar regulatory environments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Andritz, as a global engineering and industrial company, operates within diverse regulatory environments. When implementing process optimization, it is crucial to ensure that any proposed changes not only enhance efficiency, but also strictly adhere to the specific legal and ethical frameworks applicable to each operating region. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative of compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of all relevant local regulations and industry best practices before implementing any process changes. This ensures that Andritz's optimization efforts are legally sound and ethically responsible in every jurisdiction. Specifically, this means identifying and integrating any mandatory safety standards, environmental protection laws, labor regulations, and data privacy requirements that might be impacted by the proposed optimizations. This proactive, jurisdiction-specific due diligence is the cornerstone of responsible corporate behavior and risk mitigation. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance would be to implement changes based on a general understanding of optimization principles without verifying local legal requirements. This could lead to violations of specific environmental discharge limits, labor laws regarding working hours or conditions, or data handling regulations, all of which carry severe penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that practices successful in one region are universally acceptable. This overlooks the unique legal and cultural nuances of different operating environments and can result in unintended noncompliance. Finally, an approach that bypasses internal legal and compliance departments for the sake of expediency is fundamentally flawed, as it undermines established governance structures designed to prevent such risks. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the project's objectives. This should be immediately followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, with a specific focus on regulatory compliance in all relevant jurisdictions. Engaging with legal and compliance experts early and often is paramount. Any proposed optimization should be evaluated against a checklist of applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. If there is any doubt, further investigation or consultation is required before proceeding. The ultimate decision should always prioritize compliance and ethical conduct, even if it means a slower implementation timeline. Question 14. The performance metrics show a consistent dip in throughput for a specific manufacturing line at Andritz. While there's pressure to quickly boost output, what is the most professionally sound approach to address this performance issue? Option A. Expedite the implementation of a new, unproven technology for the line, prioritizing speed over a comprehensive assessment of its integration and potential impact. Option B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the throughput dip, involving cross-functional teams and reviewing all relevant operational data and procedures before proposing and implementing targeted solutions. Option C. Immediately implement a series of aggressive cost-cutting measures on the affected line, assuming that reduced expenditure will naturally lead to increased efficiency. Option D. Rely on anecdotal evidence from long-serving operators and implement their suggested quick fixes without formal validation or broader process review. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the throughput dip, involving cross-functional teams and reviewing all relevant operational data and procedures before proposing and implementing targeted solutions. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with adherence to established regulatory frameworks and internal company policies at Andritz. The pressure to improve performance metrics can lead to shortcuts that might inadvertently violate these guidelines, potentially leading to compliance issues, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to identify sustainable improvements that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through data analysis, and then proposing targeted, evidence-based improvements that align with Andritz's operational standards and any applicable industry regulations. This approach prioritizes understanding the root causes of performance deviations before implementing solutions. It ensures that any changes are well considered, documented, and likely to yield lasting positive results without compromising compliance or ethical standards. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and responsible operational management, which are implicitly expected in any professional hiring assessment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a thorough process analysis risks overlooking critical operational dependencies or regulatory requirements. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as reduced quality, increased error rates, or non-compliance with safety or environmental standards, which would be a failure of due diligence and potentially a breach of internal policies or external regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing untested or anecdotal solutions without proper validation is professionally unsound. It bypasses the necessary steps of risk assessment and impact analysis, potentially introducing new problems or failing to address the original performance issues effectively. It demonstrates a lack of rigorous problem-solving methodology and a disregard for evidence-based decision-making. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness, such as making significant changes without proper stakeholder consultation or impact assessment, can lead to resistance, confusion, and operational disruption. This neglects the importance of change management and can undermine the long-term success of any process improvement initiative. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and its impact using available data. Second, investigate the root causes through a comprehensive process review. Third, brainstorm potential solutions, evaluating each for feasibility, impact, and compliance. Fourth, select the most appropriate solution based on evidence and risk assessment. Fifth, plan and implement the solution with proper communication and change management. And finally, monitor and evaluate the results to ensure sustained improvement and compliance. Question 15. System analysis indicates that Andritz is exploring opportunities to streamline its manufacturing processes to enhance efficiency and reduce operational costs. A proposed optimization involves modifying a key production step that has historically been stable but is now identified as a potential bottleneck. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing this process optimization, considering the need to maintain product quality and regulatory compliance? Option A. Prioritize the cost savings associated with the optimization, implementing the changes broadly while planning to address any compliance issues that may arise retrospectively. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential impacts on product quality and regulatory adherence, followed by pilot testing of the optimized process in a controlled environment, and then a phased rollout based on successful validation. Option C. Focus on the technical aspects of the optimization, assuming that if the machinery functions correctly, regulatory and quality standards will automatically be met. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed changes across all production lines to realize efficiency gains as quickly as possible, assuming the current process is robust enough to absorb minor modifications. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the proposed changes across all production lines to realize efficiency gains as quickly as possible, assuming the current process is robust enough to absorb minor modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization within a regulated industry like manufacturing, where Andritz operates. The core challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and cost reduction with the absolute necessity of maintaining compliance with stringent safety and quality standards. A misstep in process optimization can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and most critically, compromised product integrity or safety, which are paramount in this sector. The pressure to deliver results quickly can sometimes overshadow the meticulous, risk-averse approach required for regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of process changes, beginning with a thorough risk assessment and validation of any proposed optimization. This aligns with the fundamental principles of good manufacturing practices, GMP, and quality management systems, which are implicitly expected in a company like Andritz operating in a regulated environment. Specifically, any change that could impact product quality or safety must undergo rigorous testing and validation to ensure it meets all established specifications and regulatory requirements before full-scale deployment. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of introducing non-compliance or quality defects, thereby protecting both the company and its customers. The emphasis on pilot testing and phased rollout ensures that potential issues are identified and addressed in a controlled manner, preventing widespread disruption or non-compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing process changes without a comprehensive risk assessment and validation is a direct violation of the principles of due diligence and responsible operational management. This approach prioritizes speed and cost savings over safety and compliance, creating a high likelihood of regulatory breaches. It fails to acknowledge the potential downstream consequences of seemingly minor process adjustments on product quality and adherence to industry standards. Adopting a move fast and break things mentality, even in process optimization, is fundamentally incompatible with the operational realities of a company like Andritz, which is subject to strict quality and safety regulations. This approach disregards the need for controlled change and validation, increasing the probability of introducing errors or non-compliant processes that could have severe repercussions. Focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on process integrity or regulatory compliance is a narrow and ultimately detrimental strategy. While cost efficiency is important, it cannot come at the expense of meeting established standards. This approach overlooks the fact that non-compliance can lead to far greater costs in the long run through fines, recalls, and loss of business. Professional reasoning. Professionals in regulated industries must adopt a risk-based, data-driven approach to process optimization. The decision-making process should always begin with understanding the regulatory landscape and internal quality standards. Any proposed change must be evaluated for its potential impact on compliance and product integrity. A robust change management system, including thorough risk assessments, pilot testing, validation, and phased implementation, is essential. When faced with pressure to optimize, professionals should advocate for a systematic approach that prioritizes compliance and quality, even if it requires more time, by clearly articulating the risk associated with shortcuts. Question 16. Market research demonstrates that Andritz's project management workflows could be streamlined to improve efficiency. A proposal suggests automating data entry for project status updates, which currently involves manual input from various regional teams. However, this automation would require consolidating data from disparate systems, potentially impacting the granularity and immediate auditability of certain historical project metrics. Considering the regulatory framework governing data integrity and reporting for engineering projects, which approach to process optimization is most professionally sound for Andritz? Option A. Prioritize the automation of data entry for new projects only, deferring any changes to historical data handling until a later phase. Option B. Rely on the regional teams to maintain their existing manual data entry processes to avoid any potential disruption or compliance risks associated with automation. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed automation on data integrity and auditability, consulting with legal and compliance teams to ensure adherence to all relevant regulations before proceeding with any implementation. Option D. Implement the proposed automation immediately to capture efficiency gains, with a plan to address any data integrity issues retrospectively. Correct answer is D. Implement the proposed automation immediately to capture efficiency gains, with a plan to address any data integrity issues retrospectively. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's desire for efficiency with the ethical and regulatory obligations to maintain data integrity and client confidentiality. Andritz, as a global engineering and industrial company, operates within a complex regulatory environment that mandates strict adherence to data handling and reporting standards. A hasty or incomplete approach to process optimization can lead to significant compliance breaches, reputational damage, and financial penalties. The correct approach involves a systematic and compliant review of existing processes, focusing on identifying inefficiencies without compromising data accuracy or security. This entails engaging relevant stakeholders, understanding the current workflows in detail, and proposing changes that are validated against regulatory requirements and best practices. This approach ensures that any optimization efforts are sustainable, ethical, and legally sound, aligning with the principles of responsible business conduct expected of companies like Andritz. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by implementing changes without proper validation risks violating data protection regulations, such as those concerning the accuracy and security of client information. Another incorrect approach that bypasses internal compliance checks or legal review could lead to non-compliance with industry-specific regulations or contractual obligations, exposing Andritz to legal repercussions. Furthermore, an approach that overlooks the potential impact on data integrity, even if not directly violating a specific regulation, is ethically unsound and undermines the trust placed in Andritz by its clients and partners. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives and constraints, including all applicable regulatory frameworks. This is followed by a comprehensive assessment of the current state, identification of potential solutions, and a rigorous evaluation of each solution against compliance, ethical, and operational criteria. Pilot testing and stakeholder consultation are crucial steps before full implementation. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that Andritz's current project management workflow for client onboarding has a significant time lag. To address this, a proposal suggests immediately implementing a new, unproven software solution that promises to automate 80% of the current manual steps, with minimal initial training for the project management team. What is the most professionally sound approach for Andritz to consider? Option A. Conduct a thorough pilot program of the new software with a small, representative group of projects and project managers to assess its effectiveness, identify potential integration issues, and gather feedback before a full-scale rollout. Option B. Immediately deploy the new software across all project management teams to achieve the fastest possible reduction in onboarding time, assuming the vendor's claims are accurate. Option C. Focus on retraining existing project managers on current procedures to improve efficiency, rather than investing in new technology that may not be fully understood. Option D. Prioritize the cost savings associated with the new software by implementing it directly, and address any operational issues that arise as they occur. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough pilot program of the new software with a small, representative group of projects and project managers to assess its effectiveness, identify potential integration issues, and gather feedback before a full-scale rollout. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the ethical and regulatory obligations of Andritz. The pressure to optimize processes quickly can lead to overlooking critical compliance steps, Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed process improvements do not inadvertently violate industry standards or internal company policies designed to maintain operational integrity and client trust. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks, and proposing solutions that are validated through pilot testing and stakeholder consultation. This ensures that improvements are not only effective, but also sustainable and compliant with all relevant regulations and best practices. Specifically, this approach aligns with principles of good corporate governance and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected of companies like Andritz operating in regulated industries. It prioritizes data-driven decision-making and risk mitigation, ensuring that any changes are thoroughly vetted before full implementation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without adequate validation risks introducing unforeseen issues. This could lead to operational disruptions, potential breaches of service-level agreements with clients, and reputational damage. Furthermore, bypassing established review protocols may violate internal audit requirements or even specific regulatory guidelines that mandate documented change management processes. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost reduction above all else, without considering the impact on quality or compliance, is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to a decline in service delivery, increased error rates, and potential non-compliance with industry-specific standards or contractual obligations. Such a short-sighted focus can ultimately incur greater costs in the long run due to remediation, penalties, or loss of business. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured problem-solving framework. This includes clearly defining the problem, gathering relevant data, identifying potential solutions, evaluating each solution against criteria such as effectiveness, feasibility, cost, and compliance, selecting the optimal solution, implementing it with appropriate controls, and finally, monitoring and evaluating the results. Throughout this process, adherence to ethical principles and regulatory requirements must be paramount. Question 18. Investigation of potential process optimization within Andritz's manufacturing operations reveals an opportunity to significantly reduce material waste. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and the company's commitment to responsible operations? Option A. Implementing changes based on observed waste patterns without detailed data analysis or consultation with the quality control department. Option B. Relying on suggestions from a single experienced operator who claims to know the most efficient way to reduce waste without further investigation or validation. Option C. Conducting a thorough review of the entire process, gathering quantitative data on waste generation, consulting with relevant departments e.g. engineering, quality control, environmental health and safety, and proposing solutions that balance efficiency with compliance and sustainability. Option D. Prioritizing the quickest and cheapest method to reduce waste, even if it means slightly compromising on material quality or introducing minor deviations from standard operating procedures. The correct answer is A. Implementing changes based on observed waste patterns without detailed data analysis or consultation with the quality control department. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Andritz employee tasked with optimizing a process. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to adhere strictly to the Andritz Code of Conduct and relevant industry best practices, which often encompass ethical considerations, data integrity, and responsible innovation. A hasty or poorly considered optimization could inadvertently lead to compliance breaches, reputational damage, or even safety concerns, necessitating careful judgment. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven, and collaborative method. This entails thoroughly understanding the existing process, identifying bottlenecks through objective analysis, and proposing solutions that are not only efficient but also compliant with Andritz's internal policies and any applicable industry standards. This approach prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and stakeholder consultation, ensuring that any proposed changes are robust, sustainable, and ethically sound. It aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and continuous improvement expected of employees. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without a comprehensive understanding of the process's implications would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to overlooking critical quality control steps or environmental considerations, potentially violating regulatory requirements or Andritz's ethical commitments. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or personal bias rather than objective data, risks introducing new inefficiencies or compliance issues. This disregards the importance of rigorous analysis and evidence-based decision-making, which are fundamental to professional integrity. Furthermore, bypassing necessary consultation with relevant departments or stakeholders before implementing changes demonstrates a lack of teamwork and due diligence, potentially leading to unforeseen negative consequences and a failure to uphold collaborative best practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of the problem and objectives. This should be followed by thorough data gathering and analysis, considering all relevant internal policies and external regulations. Next, potential solutions should be brainstormed and evaluated based on their feasibility, impact, and compliance. Crucially, stakeholder consultation and feedback should be integrated throughout the process. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented with careful monitoring and evaluation to ensure its effectiveness and adherence to all standards. Question 19. Strategic planning requires Andritz to identify opportunities for process optimization within its manufacturing operations. Considering the company's commitment to operational excellence and employee development, which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with responsible implementation? Option A. Implement significant process changes across all departments simultaneously to achieve rapid cost savings and efficiency improvements. Option B. Prioritize the adoption of the latest technology without assessing its compatibility with existing workflows or the need for employee retraining. Option C. Introduce process modifications incrementally, starting with a pilot program in a single department, accompanied by thorough employee training and feedback mechanisms before wider rollout. Option D. Focus exclusively on automating tasks to reduce labor costs, with minimal employee involvement in the transition. The correct answer is A. Implement significant process changes across all departments simultaneously to achieve rapid cost savings and efficiency improvements. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the potential impact on employee well-being and adherence to established operational procedures within Andritz. The pressure to optimize processes can sometimes lead to overlooking critical human factors or regulatory compliance, necessitating careful judgment. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of process changes, starting with a pilot program and comprehensive employee training. This is the best professional practice because it allows for controlled testing of new workflows, identification of unforeseen issues, and ensures that employees are adequately equipped to adapt to changes. This aligns with ethical considerations of employee welfare and responsible change management, and implicitly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring that new processes are thoroughly vetted before widespread adoption, minimizing risks of non-compliance with any applicable operational standards or safety guidelines that Andritz is bound by. An approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering employee impact or thorough testing is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to increased errors, decreased morale, and potential breaches of operational protocols, which may have regulatory implications if Andritz operates under specific industry standards or certifications. Similarly, implementing changes without adequate training or consultation with the affected workforce disregards ethical obligations to employees and can result in resistance, reduced productivity, and a failure to achieve the intended process improvements, potentially leading to operational inefficiencies that could indirectly affect compliance. Rushing the implementation without a pilot phase risks introducing systemic flaws that are harder to rectify later and could have broader operational or even safety consequences, which would be a failure in professional due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic view of process optimization. This involves assessing not only the potential for efficiency, but also the impact on personnel, existing procedures, and any relevant regulatory or ethical obligations. A structured approach, including risk assessment, stakeholder consultation, pilot testing, and comprehensive training, is crucial for sustainable and responsible process improvement. Question 20. Benchmark analysis indicates that Andritz's current production line for specialized components is experiencing inefficiencies. When considering process optimization strategies to improve throughput and reduce waste, which of the following actions best demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical operations across all Andritz's global sites? Option A. Implementing a standardized optimization protocol across all sites immediately, based on the most efficient methods identified in a single high-performing region, assuming these will be universally applicable. Option B. Focusing solely on internal efficiency metrics and shareholder value, with the understanding that regulatory compliance will be addressed reactively if any issues are flagged by external bodies. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive review of all relevant local and international regulations, ethical guidelines, and industry-specific standards for each operating region before proposing and implementing any process changes, ensuring full compliance and ethical alignment. Option D. Prioritizing the adoption of the quickest and most cost-effective optimization techniques, with a plan to address any regulatory or ethical concerns that may arise after implementation. The correct answer is A. Implementing a standardized optimization protocol across all sites immediately, based on the most efficient methods identified in a single high-performing region, assuming these will be universally applicable. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Andritz, as a global engineering and industrial company, operates within diverse regulatory environments. When implementing process optimization, it is crucial to ensure that any proposed changes not only enhance efficiency, but also strictly adhere to the specific legal and ethical frameworks applicable to each operating region. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative of compliance, avoiding any actions that could lead to legal penalties, reputational damage, or ethical breaches. The correct approach involves a thorough review and understanding of all applicable regulations and ethical guidelines before implementing any process optimization. This ensures that proposed changes are compliant from the outset, minimizing risks. Specifically, this approach aligns with principles of responsible corporate conduct and due diligence, which are often codified in various national laws and industry best practices. For instance, data privacy regulations, like GDPR in Europe, if applicable to the specific operational context, or environmental protection laws would need to be meticulously considered. Ethical guidelines also play a role, ensuring fair labor practices and transparent operations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance would fail to identify potential regulatory conflicts. For example, implementing a new data collection system for process monitoring without first assessing its compatibility with data protection laws in relevant jurisdictions would be a significant ethical and legal failure. Similarly, optimizing a manufacturing process in a way that might inadvertently increase emissions beyond permitted levels in a particular region would violate environmental regulations. Another incorrect approach might be to assume that a process optimization successful in one region is universally applicable without reevaluation, potentially overlooking local regulatory nuances or specific industry standards that Andritz must uphold in other operating territories. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations specific to each jurisdiction. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive regulatory and ethical impact assessment for any proposed process optimization. This involves consulting legal counsel and compliance officers familiar with the specific jurisdictions involved. The next step is to integrate compliance requirements into the design and implementation phases of the optimization. Continuous monitoring and auditing should follow to ensure ongoing adherence. This systematic approach ensures that process improvements are sustainable, responsible, and legally sound.